Welcome to this Bible audio teaching series. We are beginning at the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1. The word Genesis means beginning or origin. This chapter reveals the beginning of the heavens, the earth, light, life, humanity, and God's ordered creation. As we study each verse, we will first hear the verse from the King James Version, followed by a clear explanation of its meaning. Let us begin. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This opening verse introduces us to the central person of the entire Bible, God. Before there was an earth, a sky, an ocean, a star, or even time as we understand it, God already existed. God was not created, and He did not suddenly appear. He is eternal, meaning He has always existed and will always exist. The words, "in the beginning," refer to the beginning of creation, not the beginning of God. God existed before the beginning. The verse says that God created the heaven and the earth. This means that everything in the universe owes its existence to Him. Creation was not presented as an accident or a meaningless event. It was the intentional work of an intelligent and powerful Creator. The very first verse of the Bible gives us the foundation for everything that follows. God exists, God creates, and everything belongs to Him. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. At this point, the earth existed, but it had not yet been formed into the beautiful and organized world we know today. The words "without form and void" mean that the earth was unformed and empty. There were no people, animals, plants, countries, cities, or defined landscapes. Darkness covered the deep waters, but even in the darkness, God was present. The Spirit of God moved over the waters, showing us that God was actively preparing creation for what would happen next. The darkness and emptiness were not beyond His control. This verse teaches us something encouraging. When a situation appears dark, empty, or disorganized, God can still be at work. He can bring order out of confusion, purpose out of emptiness, and light into darkness. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God spoke, and light immediately appeared. He did not need tools, materials, help, or time to figure out how to create it. The power was in His word. When God commanded light to exist, darkness could not stop it. This light appeared before the sun, moon, and stars were appointed later in the chapter. That means God was not dependent on the sun to produce light. He is the creator of light and the one who determines where it shines. Throughout the Bible, light also represents truth, holiness, life, and the presence of God. Darkness often represents confusion, evil, or separation from God. The first recorded words spoken by God in the Bible brought light into darkness. This introduces a truth we will see repeatedly throughout Scripture. When God speaks, His word brings change. Genesis chapter 1, verse 4. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God examined the light and declared that it was good. When God calls something good, it means that it is right, beneficial, and fulfilling the purpose for which He created it. The light was exactly as God intended it to be. God then separated the light from the darkness. He established a clear distinction between the two. This separation reveals an important pattern in creation. God brings order by establishing boundaries. He assigns everything its proper place and purpose. God is not the author of confusion. From the beginning, His work reflected wisdom structure, and order. Genesis chapter 1, verse 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. God named the light day and the darkness night. By naming them, God demonstrated his authority over them. The day and night were not independent forces. They existed under the direction of their Creator. The phrase "the evening and the morning" marks the completion of the first day. God had established the basic rhythm by which human beings would later measure time. This verse reminds us that time itself is part of God's creation. God is not controlled by time because he existed before it. He created the pattern of days and nights and placed the world within that order. And with evening and morning, the first day of creation was complete. Genesis chapter 1, verse 6. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." God now commanded a firmament to appear between the waters. The word firmament refers to an expanse or open space. In this context, it describes the sky or atmosphere above the earth. God was separating the waters and creating the space where birds would eventually fly. He was carefully preparing the environment before placing living creatures within it. Once again, God was bringing organization to the unformed earth. Every step had a purpose, and every part of creation was being prepared in the correct order. Genesis chapter 1, verse 7. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. God made the firmament and separated the waters below it from the waters above it. The waters below would become the seas, while the expanse between them formed the visible sky and atmosphere surrounding the earth. The verse ends with the words, "And it was so." This phrase shows the complete authority of God. Whatever he commanded was accomplished. Human beings may say something and lack the ability to perform it, but God never lacks the wisdom, power, or resources necessary to fulfill his word. When God speaks, creation obeys. Genesis chapter 1, verse 8. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. God named the firmament heaven. In this verse, heaven primarily refers to the visible sky above the earth, the place where clouds form and birds fly. It is different from the spiritual heaven where God's throne is described. The second day ended with the sky established and the waters divided. God had now created another part of the environment that would soon support life. The world was still being formed, but each step was unfolding according to his plan. And with evening and morning, the second day was complete. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God commanded the waters beneath the sky to gather together so that dry land could appear. Until this moment, the surface of the earth had been covered by water. Now God established boundaries for the waters and revealed the land. The dry land would become the place where plants, animals, and human beings would live. God was preparing the earth before creating those who would inhabit it. The verse again says, "And it was so." The waters moved, the land appeared, and creation responded perfectly to the voice of God. Genesis chapter 1, verse 10. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. God called the dry land earth, and he called the gathered waters seas. By naming them, God demonstrated his ownership and authority over both the land and the oceans. Even the most powerful seas, remain under the authority of their Creator. God looked at the arrangement of the land and waters and declared it good. Everything was functioning according to His design. The physical world was not created evil. God created the earth, examined it, and called it good. Sin would later damage humanity's relationship with creation, but the world as God originally made it reflected His goodness. Genesis chapter 1, verse 11. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. God commanded vegetation to grow from the earth. He created grass, seed-producing plants, and trees that produce fruit. Each plant was created to reproduce after its own kind. An apple tree would produce apples. A grapevine would produce grapes. Wheat would produce more wheat. God placed order and consistency within the natural world. The seed inside each plant meant that vegetation could continue reproducing. God was not creating a temporary world. He was establishing a living system that could continue to grow and provide food. Once again, God spoke, and it was so. Genesis chapter 1, verse 12. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good. The earth responded to God's command and produced vegetation. Every plant and tree grew according to the purpose and nature God had given it. The plants were also given the ability to reproduce through their seeds. God examined the vegetation and declared that it was good. This verse reveals God as a provider. Before creating animals and human beings, He prepared the plants that would help sustain them. God created the provision before He introduced those who would need it. Creation was not only beautiful, it was also practical, fruitful, and capable of supporting life. Genesis chapter 1, verse 13. And the evening and the morning were the third day. The third day of creation was now complete. During this day, God gathered the waters, revealed the dry land, and caused vegetation to grow across the earth. What had once been dark, empty, and unformed was now becoming an ordered and fruitful world. The repeated pattern of evening and morning reminds us that God's work was deliberate. Every day had a purpose, and every stage prepared the way for what would come next. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years." God commanded lights to appear in the sky. These heavenly lights would separate day from night and help measure days, seasons, and years. They would provide an orderly way for people to recognize the passage of time. The word signs does not teach that people should worship the stars or allow astrology to direct their lives. The sun, moon, and stars are not gods. They are objects created by God to serve His purposes. This would have been especially important in ancient cultures that worshipped the sun or moon. Genesis makes it clear that the heavenly bodies are part of creation. Only the Creator deserves worship. Genesis chapter 1, verse 15. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. God appointed the heavenly lights to shine upon the earth. They would help establish the regular patterns of day, night, seasons, and years. Their light would also support the conditions necessary for life on the earth. The verse ends by saying, "And it was so." God's command was completely fulfilled. Nothing needed to be corrected, repaired, or attempted a second time. God's wisdom was perfect, and his power was sufficient to accomplish exactly what he intended. Genesis chapter 1, verse 16. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. The greater light refers to the sun, and the lesser light refers to the moon. The sun was appointed to govern the daylight hours, while the moon was appointed to govern and mark the night. The verse then simply says, "He made the stars also." That short statement describes something enormous. The countless stars, galaxies, and vast reaches of space were all created by God. What seems immeasurably large to humanity is still the work of his hands. The sun, moon, and stars are powerful and magnificent, but they are not divine. They are created objects that serve the purpose of their creator. Genesis chapter 1, verse 17. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. God placed the heavenly lights in their appointed positions. Their locations, movements, and functions were not presented as accidental. God intentionally arranged them to shine upon the earth and fulfill his purpose. This verse shows the precision of creation. God did not merely create the heavenly bodies and leave them without direction. He ordered them according to his wisdom. The universe reflects structure because it was created by a wise and orderly God. Genesis chapter 1, verse 18. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. The heavenly lights fulfilled the roles God had given them. They governed the visible cycles of day and night, and maintained the distinction between light and darkness. God examined their work and declared that it was good. Everything was functioning in harmony with his plan. The dependable patterns of sunrise, sunset, seasons, and years reveal the order God built into creation. These patterns also remind us of his faithfulness. The Creator established a world that operates according to reliable rhythms. Genesis chapter 1, verse 19. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. The fourth day of creation was complete. God had now placed the sun, moon, and stars in the heavens. These lights would govern the day and night and help mark the passage of time. By this point, the earth had light, an atmosphere, land, seas, vegetation, and heavenly lights. The environment was prepared. God was now ready to fill the waters, sky, and land with living creatures. Genesis chapter 1, verse 20. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." God commanded the waters to become filled with living creatures, and he commanded birds to fly through the sky. The word abundantly shows the generosity of God's creative power. He did not create only a few animals. He filled the waters and sky with a great variety of life. The seas would contain creatures of many shapes, colors, and sizes. The sky would become filled with birds. God had prepared the water and the sky first. Now, he filled those environments with the creatures designed to live within them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 21. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. God created the great sea creatures, and every living thing that moved through the waters. The expression great whales can refer broadly to the enormous creatures of the sea. Even the largest and most mysterious ocean animals were created by God and remained under his authority. God also created every winged bird after its kind. Each creature received its own nature and the ability to reproduce according to the order God established. God examined the life in the seas and skies and declared it good. The enormous variety of animal life displays his creativity and wisdom. Genesis chapter 1, verse 22. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. God blessed the sea creatures and birds, and commanded them to reproduce. This is the first time the word blessed appears in the Bible. God's blessing included his favor and his power, enabling the creatures to fulfill their purpose. The seas were not meant to remain nearly empty, and only a few birds were not meant to remain in the sky. Life was designed to multiply and spread. God's creation was marked by fruitfulness and abundance. His blessing allowed living creatures to continue from one generation to the next. Genesis chapter 1, verse 23. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. The fifth day of creation was now complete. The waters were filled with living creatures, and birds were flying through the sky. The earth was becoming increasingly active and full of life. Plants grew on the land, fish moved through the seas, and birds flew above the earth. Everything was unfolding according to God's plan, and every creature occupied the environment God had prepared for it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 24. And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. God now commanded the earth to bring forth land animals. The word cattle includes livestock and herd animals. Creeping thing refers to creatures that move close to the ground. Beast of the earth refers broadly to wild animals. Each creature was created after its own kind, with an identity and purpose determined by God. The verse ends with, and it was so. Every category of land animal appeared in response to the command of its creator. Genesis chapter 1, verse 25. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. God made the wild animals, livestock, and creatures that moved along the ground. Each animal was created according to its kind and given a proper place within the world. The variety of animals reveals the creativity of God. From the smallest crawling creature to the largest land animal, each one demonstrates another expression of his wisdom. God saw that the animal kingdom was good. However, creation was not yet complete. God was about to create someone uniquely made in his own image. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. This verse introduces the creation of humanity. God said, Let us make man in our image. Christians understand this language as being consistent with what the Bible later reveals about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Being made in God's image does not mean that human beings are gods or that God has an ordinary human body. It means that people were created to reflect certain qualities God gave them. Human beings can think, communicate, create, make moral choices, form meaningful relationships, and know their Creator. Every person has a spiritual and moral value that separates humanity from the rest of earthly creation. God also gave humanity dominion over the earth. Dominion means responsible authority and stewardship. It does not give people permission to abuse animals or destroy the environment. Human beings were appointed to care for the world as representatives serving under God's greater authority. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. This verse repeats that humanity was created in God's image, emphasizing the importance of this truth. Every human being possesses dignity and value because every person bears the image of the Creator. Human worth does not come from money, appearance, race, education, health, age, popularity, or social position. Our value begins with the God who created us. The verse also says that God created humanity, male and female. Both men and women equally bear God's image. Both are valuable, and both share in humanity's God-given purpose. Because people are created in God's image, every human life should be treated with dignity, compassion, and respect. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. God blessed the man and woman, and instructed them to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. In the King James Version, the word replenish means to fill. Humanity was commanded to grow, form families and communities, and spread throughout the earth. God also instructed them to subdue the earth. This meant responsibly managing and developing its resources. Human work, creativity, cultivation, and progress were part of God's original plan before sin entered the world. Work itself was not a curse. The pain and frustration later associated with work came after humanity's rebellion. Human beings were given authority, but it was delegated authority. God remained the true owner of creation, while humanity served as its caretaker. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. In Older English, the word meat can mean food in general. God gave seed-bearing plants and fruit trees to humanity for food. This verse presents God as a loving provider. He did not create human beings and then abandon them to figure out how to survive. Before humanity appeared, God had already prepared the food they would need. This also reveals the peaceful nature of the original creation. In Genesis chapter 1, humanity received vegetation for food. Permission to eat animals is specifically recorded later, after the flood, in Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 1, verse 30, And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to every thing that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. God also provided food for the animals. His care extended to the beasts of the earth, the birds of the sky, and every creature that moved along the ground. God is not only the creator of life, he is also the provider who understands what life needs to continue. This verse presents a picture of peace and harmony in the original creation. God supplied what his creatures needed, and creation operated according to his good design. The verse closes with the familiar words, and it was so. God's plan and provision were established. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. God looked upon everything he had created, Earlier in the chapter, God examined individual parts of creation and called them good. Now he looked at the entire completed creation and declared that it was very good. Everything existed in harmony. There was no human sin, corruption, or rebellion. There was no broken relationship between God and humanity. Every part of creation fulfilled its intended purpose. Humanity stood as God's image bearer, blessed by him and entrusted with the responsibility of caring for the earth. This verse also teaches that evil did not exist because God created something defective. God's completed creation was very good. Sin, suffering, and death entered the human story afterward through rebellion, which will be explained beginning in Genesis chapter 3. And with evening and morning, the sixth day was complete. This concludes Genesis chapter 1. In this chapter, we learned that God is the eternal creator of the heavens and the earth. He spoke light into darkness, brought order out of emptiness, filled the world with life, and provided for every creature he made. We also learned that human beings hold a unique place in creation. Men and women were created in the image of God, giving every person dignity, value, and purpose. Genesis chapter 1 begins with an earth that is dark, empty, and unformed. It ends with a world filled with light, beauty, life, provision, and purpose. A world that God declared to be very good. Join us next time as we continue with Genesis chapter 2, where we will learn about the seventh day, the Garden of Eden, the creation of Adam and Eve, and God's original design for human life and marriage.